The Man Who Dared a King by Father Gerald T. Brennan. Chapter 1. A City Sleeps. It was old London, the London of merry England, the London of kings and knights, the London of Henry VIII, the London of John Fisher. It was midnight in old London, dark, black midnight, the last midnight in old London for John Fisher. High up in a prison tower an old man walked slowly across his cell. His hair was white, his head was bent, his face was sad. His clothes were thin and torn, his hands were clasped in prayer. Through his fingers there slipped a rosary. Hail Mary, Hail Mary, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Over and over again the man prayed the same prayer. Pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Here was a strange sight. A man prayed while a city slept. Why didn't he blow out the candle and go to bed? Old men need sleep just as well as cities. Did this man know that he would never see another midnight? Did this man know that the angels in heaven were making a golden crown for his head? Why was this man in this dreadful prison? What crime had he done? Was this man afraid to die? Afraid to die? Never! For years he has sat at table looking into the face of a human skull, a skull that reminded him of death, a skull that prepared him for death. Why then, on this midnight, should John Fisher be afraid to die? A promise. God must love babies because He makes all babies so beautiful. In the year 1459, God gave one of His lovely babies to a man and his wife, Robert and Agnes Fisher, who lived in England. "Let's call the baby John," said the father after much thought. The mother agreed, and that became the baby's name, John Fisher. It was fun to watch the baby grow. He was a strong, healthy boy. Then came John's first birthday, his second birthday, his fifth birthday, his eighth birthday. Before John saw his ninth birthday, his father died. This made John feel very sad. John had lost a great friend. Of course, John went to school. He learned to read and write. He liked books. He studied hard. John learned about God. He learned to know God. He learned to love God. "He is always honest. He will never tell a lie." That's what John Fisher's schoolmates used to say about him. John Fisher was not satisfied in learning little things. He wanted to learn big things. He worked hard at his books and went to college. All through his years of study, God kept His eye on John Fisher. Time and time again, God spoke to John. God seemed to be calling to him, "Why don't you work for me? Why don't you work for me?" God seemed to whisper those words so often in his ears. For years John thought about working for Christ, to be a priest, to be a good priest. He thought and he thought and he wondered. One night John Fisher knelt down to pray. He looked at the crucifix hanging over his bed. He began to think. Jesus did all that for me. Jesus suffered for me. Jesus died for me. What can I do for Jesus? I know what I will do. I will live for Jesus. I will work for Jesus. I will become a priest. Before the year 1500, John Fisher became a priest. Working for Christ. What a fine priest was John Fisher, one of the finest priests who ever lived in England. "I want to be a golden priest," he once said, "just as beautiful as the golden cup which I use each morning at the altar." That thought was always in the priest's mind. Every moment of his day was spent working for Christ. When he visited the sick, he made himself feel that he was doing it for Christ. He was kind to the poor because Christ loved the poor. When he taught the children their catechism, he felt that his voice was the voice of Christ. Everyone who knew him loved him. Although Father Fisher was a busy man, he was never too busy to think about God. He loved God's house, and much of his time was spent there, talking with God, asking God to help him, begging God to make him a golden priest. Every night at midnight, John Fisher knelt down to pray. Other people felt that they needed sleep. John Fisher knew he needed God. Nothing pleased the good priest more than a good joke. He was good company, a fine talker, and he had many friends. Why, even the King of England knew him and admired him. Perhaps you think that the priest was proud because he had a king for a friend. Not John Fisher. The poor were his best friends, and he loved them. Did not Christ love the poor? Certainly he did, and John Fisher wanted to be just like Christ. He wanted to be another Christ. Father Fisher wished to be a good priest, but Christ needed a good bishop. The golden priest therefore became a bishop, Bishop of Rochester. John Fisher was one step nearer the shadow of the cross. The Angel of Rochester. In the city of Rochester there lived an angel, a kind angel, a holy angel, an angel who worked each day for Christ. The Angel of Rochester was Bishop Fisher. The angels in heaven live in a beautiful home, but the home of the Angel of Rochester was the home of a poor man. There were no costly rugs on the floor, no fine chairs, no velvet drapes, no shining tables. The bishop would have none of these. He wanted to live like Christ. He wanted to be poor like Christ. Why, the bishop didn't even have a bed. He slept on straw which he placed on the floor. Of course, it was hard. It was very hard. His straw bed made him think of the baby Jesus on the first Christmas night, and that made him love it all the more. Do you know why the bishop was called Angel? Because he was so kind. His door was open to everyone. He was always ready to help others. Rich people, poor people, old people, young people, sick people, worried people, they all brought their troubles to the kind old bishop. Even little children brought their dolls and toys and begged the bishop to bless them. He was the children's friend. They loved his stories. He spoke such kind words. Each day the poor of the city made their way to the bishop's house. They were fed, they were clothed, they were sent away with a smile. "Be kind to the strangers who come to my door," was his order to his servants. Some day Jesus might come dressed as a stranger. It would be terrible to send Jesus away without helping him. No home was too poor for the bishop to enter. He spent hours with the sick, praying with them, praying for them. There are many angels in heaven. There are few angels on earth. Bishop Fisher was one of the few. A shadow. At this time England had a great sorrow. "The king is sick! The king is sick!" These 4 words travelled like lightning into every city and town of mighty England. "The king is sick! The king is sick!" Men, women, and children fell down on their knees and begged God to spare their king. They loved their king. He was their leader. King Henry VII knew that his time had come. Medicine would not help him. He became weaker and weaker. The king called for a priest and confessed his sins. The King of earth received the King of heaven in Holy Communion. Henry was ready to meet his God. Time and time again the king kissed the crucifix that he held in his hand. He pressed the cross close to his breast. Finally, tired and weak, the king breathed his last. The king was gone. Henry VII was dead. A new head wears a golden crown. Then came a new king, King Henry VIII, the son of the former king. This new king was to play a very great part in the life of the Angel of Rochester. All England prepared a grand welcome for the new king. Bands played, soldiers marched, flags flew gaily in the breeze. Princes came from all over the world. A new king, a new queen! Through the streets of London rode King Henry VIII and his wife Catherine. To right and left they bowed and smiled as the people shouted and cheered and clapped their hands. Then came the coronation. It was a solemn moment. Soldiers, princes, royal ladies, and gentlemen all fell on their knees as King Henry received his golden crown. Everyone sang the praises of the king and queen. Banquets were held in their honor. There were royal feasts. There were speeches. Once again England was happy. Bishop Fisher was especially happy. The new king was the bishop's friend. Henry was the Pope's friend. Henry VIII was a friend to the Catholic Church. Within a short time Henry won his way into the hearts of his people. He was kind, polite, generous. He was good-natured. Men, women, children, soldiers, priests, bishops, princes, all loved and respected their new king. It was an inspiring sight to see Henry VIII kneeling at Holy Mass. to know that the king confessed his sins, to watch the king as he received Holy Communion. This was good example. The king was a Catholic, and he was proud of his faith. People felt that the king could do no wrong. No wonder they praised him, no wonder they followed him. The king even found time to write a book, a Catholic book. The Pope read the book and was greatly pleased. In fact, the Pope was so pleased that he gave Henry a great honor. The Pope called Henry the Defender of the Faith. Of course, Bishop Fisher was very, very proud of his king. The bishop knew that the king could do much good for the church. The king could be a great leader. The king could be a great champion. The church needed a great leader. The church needed a great champion. Would Henry be this great leader? Would Henry be this great champion? Clouds over London. Henry and Catherine ruled England for 13 years. They seemed to be happy. They appeared to be good. Too often, though, the man who wears a crown is not a happy man. Henry was not happy. He had met a 16-year-old girl, Anne Boleyn. Anne was not a pretty girl, but she was young and the king admired her. The king allowed himself to fall in love with Anne. For 5 long years he was very kind to her. Anne, in turn, fell in love with the king. One day the king asked a question. "Anne," he pleaded, "will you be my wife?" Anne waited before she answered. Through her mind ran 1,000 thoughts. The wife of a king, a royal queen, fine clothes, a throne, a crown for my head, all England at my feet. At first Anne smiled, then she frowned. She bit her lip. She seemed afraid. "Henry," she answered, "you have asked me to be your wife. Catherine is already your wife. Put Catherine away. Then I shall become your wife. I shall be more than a wife. I shall be your queen." The girl's answer made the king very happy. Henry began to plan and scheme. Henry knew that a Catholic is not allowed to have 2 wives at the same time, yet Henry had made up his mind to marry Anne Boleyn. "The Pope will make an exception for a king," said Henry to himself. "After all, I am the Pope's friend. The Pope will certainly do this favor for me." Henry was due for a sad disappointment. Pope Clement listened to the king's strange request. The Pope was kind but firm. What was the Pope's answer? The Pope told Henry that he could not marry Anne because he was already married to Catherine. The king was very angry. Twice again Henry sent messengers to the Pope, and twice again they begged the Pope to allow Henry to marry Anne. "If this favor is refused," thought the Pope to himself, "Henry may turn against the Church. What will happen then? Henry can do much harm. The king may lead all England away from the Church." Did the Pope weaken? Did the Pope give in? The Pope was firm. The Pope was strong. "Christ would not allow it. I will not allow it." This was the Pope's answer. This whole affair greatly disturbed Bishop Fisher. He prayed that the Pope would stand his ground. While the bishop respected the king, yet, to Bishop Fisher, God's law came first. The 68-year-old bishop knew that there would be trouble. He was not afraid. Bishop Fisher feared no king. He feared only God. The man who dared a king. These were hard days for Catherine, the queen. She loved Henry. She was to remain his wife. Catherine knew that Anne was trying to steal her throne. Few people saw the queen during those dark days. She was not allowed to leave the castle. Her friends were not permitted to visit her. Catherine was sad, worried, afraid. Bishop Fisher, however, remained loyal to the queen. He was the one friend whom Catherine could trust. The bishop was determined that the queen should receive justice. He would fight to the end. The Pope sent a messenger to London. This messenger was to learn both sides of the case. Henry was to tell his story. Catherine was to tell her story. The trial was held in the Great Hall of Blackfriars in London. It was a large room, the floor of which was covered with beautiful rugs. Gorgeous draperies hung on the walls. At the end of the great hall sat the messenger of the Pope. At 10 o'clock on the morning of June 21st, 1529, a trumpet sounded through the great hall. The messenger arose. The king and queen entered the great hall. Catherine was led to a chair on the left of the messenger. Henry took a chair on the right. Catherine was hardly seated when she rose to her feet. Every eye was upon her. Slowly she passed in front of the messenger. She walked toward the king. She knelt at his feet. "Henry," she pleaded, "for 20 years I have been your wife. I have been a good wife. I have been a faithful wife. I have loved you, Henry. I still love you. Let me continue to be your wife. Give me justice. Have pity on me, Henry. Please, please, please." Then the queen arose. She turned. She left the great hall. A few smiled. Some sneered. Bishop Fisher bowed his head. There was tense silence. The king arose. All wondered what the king would say. The king spoke in a low voice. "Catherine," he began, "has spoken the truth. She has been a good wife. She has been a good queen. Lately, however, I have worried a great deal. I have worried about my marriage to Catherine. I have wondered whether we are really married. I have felt that my marriage to Catherine has not been right before God. God has not blessed us with a son." Henry was a good actor, a good pretender. He was playing his part well. Catherine had been married to Henry's brother. When Henry's brother died, Catherine married Henry. But now the king was worried. Was it not wrong for Henry to marry his dead brother's wife? God had not blessed Henry and Catherine. There was no son, no young prince to become king after Henry. Thus did Henry explain his worry to the great crowd gathered in the hall of Blackfriars. But Henry was lying. Queen Catherine was truly his wife, and Henry knew it. He was lying, and all there listening to him knew he was lying. Would nobody challenge him? Were all those present so afraid of Henry? There was a slight noise. Henry stopped talking. A tall figure stepped forth from the crowd. A bishop, a single challenger to brave the anger of the king. Bishop Fisher walked to the front of the great hall. He faced the king. "You have not my permission to put Catherine away," said Bishop Fisher in a loud, clear voice. "I stand for the truth. Catherine is your wife. You cannot put her away." Color came to the king's cheeks. He wondered at this man who dared a king. "I wish to be faithful to my king," continued the bishop, "but first I must be faithful to my God. Did not Jesus Christ say that no man can have 2 wives at the same time? No man, not even a king, not even the King of England, can have 2 wives at the same time. This is God's truth, and for God's truth I shall be willing to die." The king was furious. He eyed Bishop Fisher with a fierce glance. Raising his hand, Henry spoke in a loud voice. "Bishop Fisher," said the king, "no man shall stand in my way. No bishop shall stand in my way. Even God shall not stand in my way. No one can hold me back. Anne Boleyn shall be my wife." The trial was over. Bishop Fisher had dared his king. His king had dared God. A bold plan. The days that followed were sad ones for Bishop Fisher. They were days of much worry. Would Henry carry out his threat? Would Henry turn his back on God? What would happen to the Church? Would Henry lead the people of England away from God? These were the questions that came from time to time to the bishop's mind. The good bishop spent long hours with his God, praying to God, begging God to calm the temper of the king. But Henry was not to be calmed. He had been dared by a bishop. His pride had been hurt. Urged on by the wicked Anne Boleyn, Henry began to plan. "Whoever shall stand in my way shall suffer much," was the proud boast of the angry king. Henry's plan was a bold one. He was not satisfied to be the King of England. He would be more than a king. He would be Pope, Pope of England. He wished to rule the Catholic Church. Henry told his plan to his friends. All agreed that the plan was a good one. Once again Bishop Fisher came forward to defend the Church. He spoke strongly against the king. No king has a right to rule the Church. That power belongs to the Pope of Rome. When Henry heard these words he was wild with rage. He sent for Bishop Fisher. Was the bishop afraid? Not at all. Bishop Fisher was calm. He reminded the king that the churches belonged to God. God had chosen the Pope to rule his churches. No king could steal that power from the Pope. Henry felt that the bishop's words were an insult. The king tried to frighten the bishop. He threatened to punish the bishop. Bishop Fisher refused to be frightened. "I will show the Pope. I will show you what a king can do," cried Henry at the top of his voice. The anger of the king, the threat of the king, did not move Bishop Fisher. The bishop stood his ground. Henry kept his word. Once again, Henry defied Bishop Fisher. He defied the Pope. Henry made himself head of the Catholic Church. The king became Pope of the Church in England. The stolen treasure. Catherine was still Queen of England, a queen in name only. Still, she was a queen. Things were moving too slowly for the jealous Anne Boleyn. She wanted Henry for herself. She wished to be queen. Time and time again she complained to Henry. "Are you afraid of an old man? Do you fear John Fisher?" Thus did the wicked Anne tease the king. Henry could stand it no longer. He decided to show the world that he was not afraid of an old man. He was not afraid of John Fisher. The king made a law which said that Henry was no longer married to Catherine, that he was free to marry Anne. This gladdened the heart of Anne Boleyn. Catherine was heartbroken when she heard the news. The king had thrown her aside. A young girl had stolen her throne. Men and women shook their heads. The king can do no wrong. The king can do no wrong. They had heard those words so often, but deep down in their hearts they knew that the king had done wrong. He had sinned against God. His sin was a very great one. There had been a time when Henry feared sin. That time was past. He feared sin no longer. How could a man fear sin when he no longer feared God? Anne won her point at last. She married Henry. Anne was very happy. Now she was Henry's wife. Now she was Henry's queen. The people of England did not wish to have Anne as their queen. True, Henry's friends showered the new queen with gifts and banquets, but there was many a sad heart in England. The people felt that England had been disgraced. They found it hard to accept Anne. The mock marriage was a sad blow to Bishop Fisher. He was a sick man, sick in body, sick in heart. He had fought for the truth. He had failed. His dream had been broken. The good bishop was tired of life, an old man, weary, sad, disappointed. What was ahead? Quiet days? Peaceful days? Happy days? Perhaps days of sorrow and suffering? Bishop Fisher wondered. The wheels turn. Things seemed to crowd into the life of the Angel of Rochester. He could not hold them back. Bishop Fisher knew that his days on earth would not be many. He was an old man, thin, tired, and weak. He was a sick man. He was tired of kings, queens, and royal courts. He hated their lies. He wished to be left alone. The bishop longed for quiet, peace, and happiness. He found great joy in prayer. His one wish was to spend the rest of his life in quiet prayer with God. However, Henry and Anne had other ideas. They felt that the Bishop of Rochester was a thorn in their sides. How could they be happy when they knew that John Fisher was against them? The king and queen went out of their way to find excuses to torment the good bishop. How could they punish the holy man? They watched their chance. The chance came when a baby girl was born to Henry and Anne. The child was called Elizabeth. If Henry and Anne should die and leave no son, this Elizabeth would become queen and rule England. To make certain that Elizabeth would become queen, Henry made a law. Every person in England was ordered to promise solemnly that Elizabeth would have the right to become queen and rule England if no son were born to Henry and Anne. Bishop Fisher refused to make this solemn promise. This made the king so angry that he ordered all priests and bishops to preach against the Pope. People were forbidden to pray for the Pope. The Pope's name was erased from all prayer books. No one was allowed to obey the Pope. Bishop Fisher refused to listen to the king. The bishop refused to preach against the Pope. That was enough for the king. He ordered John Fisher to come to London. The poor old bishop set out for London. He rode through the streets of Rochester on a donkey. He blessed the people who lined the streets. Here was a sad sight. No wonder men and women shed bitter tears. People admired this man because he was brave. He had fought for the truth. He had dared a king. In that crowd there were many a broken heart. People felt that the kind old man would never return to Rochester. They were losing a friend. The journey to London was a long one, a hard journey for an old man. When the bishop arrived in London, he was brought before the king's officers. Another man would have trembled with fear, but not John Fisher. The bishop was calm. "Will you swear that Elizabeth has a right to become queen?" the bishop was asked. "I will not swear," was the bishop's answer. The officers were surprised. All England had sworn. Did this man dare to refuse? "Will you swear," they asked the bishop, "no longer to obey the Pope of Rome?" "Before God and all England," John Fisher spoke in a firm voice, "my conscience will not allow me to swear in this way. The Pope of Rome is my Pope. I must obey him." Once again John Fisher had spoken the truth. Once again he had defied his king. The soldiers led the bishop away, to prison, to the Tower of London. The time had come for the Angel of Rochester. An angel in rags. A prison is not a cheerful place. The Tower of London was no exception. The prison home of the Bishop of Rochester was a room high up in the bell tower. It was a small room, no heat, damp and cold. There was a cot, a table, and a chair. During most of the day the room was dark. A small window allowed the noonday sun merely to peek into the cell. In this gloomy place Bishop Fisher spent the last 14 months of his life. It may have been a merry England, but it was a sad England for John Fisher. His clothes were thin and torn. He was an angel in rags, and he suffered from the cold. He ate little. He could not eat. He was sick. He was weak. No priest was allowed to visit the prison cell. There was no confession, no communion, no mass. These were the things that were so dear to the heart of the good bishop. Try as they did, these wicked men could not take God from John Fisher's heart. The bishop prayed by the hour. He prayed God to have mercy on the king. Each midnight he arose from his bed to pray. Almighty God was his friend. Yes, it was a sorry England, a sad England for Bishop Fisher. 14 months of sorrow, pain, and suffering. During all those long months the king tried many times to make John Fisher change his mind. The king begged the bishop to say that Henry was the head of the church. The king's friends begged Bishop Fisher to change his mind. They met with no success. The bishop was firm. He refused to say that Henry came before God. Here, indeed, was a man of courage, a man who was not afraid, a man who was willing to suffer rather than say that wrong is right. He had served 2 kings. He had tried to serve well. Yet all England pointed a finger at this man in his prison cell. All England claimed that he was disloyal to his king. Disloyal to his king? Perhaps, but not disloyal to his God. The Red Hat. The news of John Fisher's arrest reached far-away Rome. It disturbed the Pope. It worried him. The Pope admired the Bishop of Rochester. He made every effort to have John Fisher freed, but his efforts were in vain. "Perhaps, if I honor Bishop Fisher, the king will be pleased," thought the Pope to himself. The Pope decided to make Bishop Fisher a cardinal. To be made a cardinal, you know, is a high honor, one of the highest honors in the Catholic Church. Cardinals are next to the Pope. They advise the Pope. To each cardinal the Pope gives a round red hat. A cardinal wears his red hat on certain important occasions. When Henry heard that John Fisher was to be made a cardinal, he was not pleased. He was filled with rage. "Let the Pope send Bishop Fisher a cardinal's hat," the king cried out in anger. "When the hat comes, Bishop Fisher will have no head to put it on." Queen Anne, too, flew into a rage. "How dare the Pope send John Fisher a cardinal's hat?" Despite the anger of the king and queen, Bishop Fisher was made a cardinal. King Henry stormed and raged. This was a bitter pill to swallow. Did not the Pope know that Henry was the head of the Church of England? Henry sought revenge. He sent his officers to the Tower of London. "Make Bishop Fisher swear that I am the head of the Church," was the king's order. "Tell Bishop Fisher that if he refuses to swear, he shall be put to death as a traitor." The threat of death did not frighten the new cardinal. Cardinal Fisher was calm, strong, firm in his answer. His answer was "No." The Way of the Cross. It was morning, June 17th, 1535. Cardinal Fisher sat in his prison cell. His elbows rested on the table. His face was buried in his hands. There was a knock on the door. The door opened. Soldiers entered the room. "We have come to take you to Westminster for trial," was their greeting to the 76-year-old man. Cardinal Fisher arose. He put on a long black gown. He was ready. The soldiers helped the cardinal down the tower stairs. At the entrance to the courtyard, John Fisher paused for a moment. He took a long, deep breath. Fresh air, the first fresh air in more than a year. The journey to Westminster was made by boat. The prisoner was guarded. He did not speak. The cardinal was a sad picture as he entered the hall at Westminster. His hair was gray, his face was drawn, his step was slow and unsteady. The past 14 months in prison had been very hard on him. The judges were already in their places. 12 men were chosen to act as a jury. The trial began. Cardinal Fisher was accused of being stubborn to the king. He had annoyed the king. He had refused to call Henry the head of the Church. He was a traitor. He was charged with treason. As the charge was read, John Fisher hung his head. The only witness against Cardinal Fisher was a Mr. Rich. He had visited the cardinal in his prison cell. Rich swore that he had heard Cardinal Fisher say that Henry was not the head of the Church. "What have you to say?" the court asked John Fisher. The cardinal knew that it was useless to defend himself. He knew that the court had already decided to find him guilty. However, this was his last chance to speak his mind. The cardinal raised his head. He stood on his feet. He turned to the jury of 12 men. "Gentlemen," he said, "I stand here alone. There is no one to defend me. I know that it is useless to speak many words. Mr. Rich has spoken the truth. I did say that Henry is not the head of the Church. I say it again before this court, before all England, before the whole world. Henry VIII is not the head of the Catholic Church." All eyes were on John Fisher as he spoke those daring words. There was silence when he finished. The jury found Cardinal Fisher guilty, guilty of treason. Then came the sentence. "Lord of Rochester," spoke the judge, "you shall go back to the Tower of London. There you shall await your death. You shall be hanged by the neck. When you are half dead, your head shall be cut from your body. Your body shall be cut into 4 parts." Cardinal Fisher heard the sentence without a murmur. It was the beginning of the end. The cardinal was placed under heavy guard, surrounded by soldiers, as he was led back to the Tower of London. When the door of the cell had been closed behind him, the prisoner fell on his knees. His prayer was the prayer of the Master. "Into thy hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit." Another Christ had begun his way of the cross. Into the dust. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. These were long days in the prison cell. Every step on the stairs, every knock on the door, made Cardinal Fisher feel that his time had come. He was not afraid. Yet he wondered, "How long must I wait? Which day will it be? Will there be a tomorrow?" The prisoner ate well. He slept well. He was calm. During those 5 days the cardinal prayed a great deal. They were important hours, and John Fisher knew it. In the meantime the sentence had been changed. His head was to be cut from his body. He was not to be hanged. At 5 o'clock on Tuesday morning the cardinal was awakened by the lieutenant of the Tower. The prisoner was told that he was to die that day. As soon as he had heard the news, the cardinal rolled over in his bed and fell fast asleep. 2 hours later the prisoner was again awakened. He was told to dress. Cardinal Fisher arose from his bed, put on a clean shirt and his best clothes. He was ready. The lieutenant returned at 9 o'clock for the prisoner. John Fisher made the sign of the cross. He picked up his New Testament. He followed the lieutenant down the stairs. Cardinal Fisher was placed in a chair which the soldiers carried. On the way to the Tower Hill, where the cardinal was to be put to death, the soldiers stopped to rest. The Angel of Rochester arose. Holding his book, the cardinal prayed, "Lord, this is the last time that I shall ever open this book. Point out some words of comfort for me in my last hour." Cardinal Fisher opened the book. His eyes fell on these words: "This is eternal life, that they may know Thee, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom Thou hast sent. I have glorified Thee on the earth. I have finished the work which Thou gavest me to do." The procession went on its way to Tower Hill. Men, women, and children crowded the way. They admired this man of courage. At Tower Hill a platform had been built that all might see. Cardinal Fisher went up the steps to the platform. His gown was removed. He stood, a noble figure, in the morning sun. The crowd was tense. There was dead silence. Many shed bitter tears. "Christian people," spoke the cardinal in a clear voice, "I have come here to die for the faith of Jesus Christ. I thank God that I am not afraid to die. May I ask you to help me with your prayers? May God save the King." The prisoner knelt down before a block. A handkerchief was tied over his eyes. He prayed aloud, "In Thee, O Lord, have I hoped." Cardinal Fisher placed his head on the block. A soldier raised a sharp axe into the air. The axe fell on the cardinal's neck. One mighty blow. The head of Cardinal Fisher rolled into the dust. John Fisher's soul was with his God. The message of the bells. Days, weeks, months, years. Hundreds of days, weeks, months, and years have passed since John Fisher's head rolled into the dust. But John Fisher has not been forgotten. Through all those years the name of John Fisher has been spoken with reverence. The world called him a hero. More than that, the world prayed for a heavenly crown for the head that never wore its red hat. Almighty God heard those prayers. Those prayers have been answered. On Sunday, May 19, 1935, 40,000 people crowded in front of St. Peter's Church in Rome. There was a blare of trumpets, a procession, priests, bishops, cardinals in scarlet robes, Swiss guards in beautiful uniforms, the Pope, Pope Pius XI. 40,000 people fell on their knees as the Pope blessed them. Then followed a thunder of applause. Before the altar of St. Peter's, Pope Pius XI knelt in prayer. When his prayer was finished, the Pope arose and walked to his golden throne. One of the cardinals walked before the throne. 3 times the cardinal begged the Pope to honor John Fisher. At the 3rd request, the Pope raised his hand. There was tense silence. Every eye was fixed on Pius. Every ear was strained to hear his message. "I, Pius XI, the Vicar of Jesus Christ, proclaim John Fisher a saint of the Church of God." Immediately the bells of St. Peter's rang out in glorious triumph. The bells of 400 churches in Rome pealed out the glad tidings. Telephone, telegraph, and radio hurried the news to the 4 corners of the earth. Prayers of thanks ascended to the throne of God. John Fisher had won his crown. The man of courage had been declared a saint. St. John of Rochester. Recording by Maria Therese. End of The Man Who Dared a King by Rev. Gerald T. Brennan.